it's Daz. As always, I hope that you're doing well, and it feels like every week is a new episode of what the heck is happening. I remember years ago when I wanted to go into the medical field, the thought of being a physician or a surgeon seemed not only like it had a stable future, but it wasn't going away anytime soon. But as of recently, there's been mass layoffs of doctors and nurses, and there's been a shortage as well of doctors and nurses. And the reasons behind this are because a lot of hospitals are losing money, and a lot of hospitals are being forced to close down. So even the healthcare field that was once seen as one of the more stable fields is no longer stable. It sort of reminds me of what's happened in tech when I was coming up in the college years 10 years ago. I can recall everybody saying, go STEM, go STEM. Don't go for liberal arts. Any liberal arts degree is useless. I was a STEM major for the longest. I was studying biology. I ended up flipping it to a sociology degree, which is in the liberal arts field, and I can recall people saying, oh, if you switch to sociology or one of those useless degrees, you're going to be a barista, you're going to be broke, and blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, irony has it, I work in a STEM field despite having a quote-unquote useless degree, and it does come in handy quite a bit, having studied sociology. Regardless, no field is very safe because, as we can see, layoffs are happening across the board. Whether you're in transportation like trucking, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a nurse or a doctor, you work in tech, or you're in customer service, and the automation of jobs is happening fairly quickly. And it's a double-edged sword because I'd be a hypocrite to sit here and tell you that I'm not happy about AI, because in many ways AI is revolutionary and it is a new frontier of the information age, but there's also things that could go wrong with AI as well. Some people are so afraid of it. I think the most concerning thing about the automation of jobs is just simply what jobs will be left for people to do, because almost any job you can think of can be automated. Whether you're talking construction, driving, teaching, medical care, coding. Like at my software company right now, I started out at a local software company in Kansas City that was well known, and it got acquired by a larger software company, and I've survived many rounds of layoffs, and now they're taking the software, because it was a health care IT company, and they're updating the software, and they're using AI to do so and coding it into Java. And while I'm no engineer or architect, I do work on a team with a lot of them. I'm an analyst. I do see how my role as a solution analyst could be easily replaced if they could teach AI to do it the same way you could teach AI to code. And that goes for almost any job, like every job I've ever had. Before that, I worked a myriad of places. I did emergency management. I've done nonprofit work. I've done customer service work. I've taught classes for the software. So all of that could be automated. But also, as I mentioned, we're in this weird frontier of AI entertainers and influencers, and how everyday people could be replaced by AI, because AI, you don't have to pay it. AI doesn't need to have any monetization, so companies could use AI and save money. AI is not going to complain. If AI has a controversy, you can easily make a new AI to replace them. And a lot of people prefer the looks of AI because we've gotten so used to seeing what's on the internet as our new standard of beauty that when we see everyday people, sometimes we're like surprised. It's kind of like how people look at TV, but I would say the internet's a little bit more of a step because there's so much editing that everyday people can do themselves online. And then outside of these mass layoffs, which continue to happen across the board, as I mentioned last week, DC has definitely become more of a military state because of all the police militarized patrolling the streets. And it's quiet. You know what else is quiet? places like Las Vegas that had a lot of revenue from tourists, and now they have seen a drop. And it's been that way on beach towns from Florida to California because Canadians and Mexicans were some of our biggest customers, and Europeans, and a lot of them are afraid to come over here because of all the ICE raids. And I can see why, because it would be a lot to get detained by accident. I hated dealing with Border Patrol when I went up to Canada. I couldn't imagine dealing with the US Border Patrol as a non citizen. Also, the homelessness crisis. Part of the reason why we're seeing this militarization of the police and federalization is because of the homeless crisis. And again, I heard that Trump is talking about having bus rides offered to the homeless to go to shelters. And a lot of people are crying that it won't solve the problem, but it is a real problem. My first job I had out of college was working with the homeless. I actually was at a food bank, and I told a lot of stories back in the day when I did it. And I can recall it really changed the way I viewed it. And I gained a lot of empathy, but I also gained a lot of understanding that it's a multifaceted situation. A lot of people end up on the streets because of hard times, mental illness, drug addiction, alcoholism, and sometimes their families cannot afford to take care of them, or their families simply don't want to, because imagine if you have small children or you just need peace of mind. And with these hospitals and long-term care facilities shutting down because of Medicaid, because a lot of these places operated primarily off of the Medicaid people had, or they're just not making money because people aren't getting paid, you're going to have more individuals that are going to be prone to be on the street or homeless if their family members don't take them back in. So it is a weird time that we're living in, where I feel like, kind of like the tectonic plates, everything is being shifted around in the US. And we're really seeing who's going to sink or swim. And it does feel very Darwinian in concept. And I think that it's by no mistake. I also feel like with this current administration, they're pushing the limits to see how far they can go. And there's a lot of casualties that will be because of this, whether it's a financial loss or something else. Also, I'm not sure how this is going to affect kids in school, but I heard that a lot of children are going to be without their lunches because of these new programs, and even the whole SNAP situation greatly reducing that. So the greed in America has just gotten worse and worse over the years. And people argue all the time over, should we get rid of capitalism? Should we go to socialism? And I think that this extreme capitalism isn't good for anyone, and it has gone more towards a technocrat society and techno-feudalism with all of the tech that we have today. But I also am not one to think that if we went straight to socialism, that would solve the problem either. Because, let's be honest, nobody really trusts the government. And I wouldn't trust the government to ration me out food or to give me a place to stay, because then I have less autonomy. However, in capitalism currently, the way it's going, there feels like a lot of things don't feel very autonomous and do feel predestined. I remember when I took a lot of sociology classes, we talked about how most people don't move vertically. Like, they think they're going to move up or down class. They just move horizontally across life. And I really believe that. I see that. Even when I look at individuals who seem like they're doing very well for themselves versus individuals who are not doing so well, when you're older, you start to realize that there were definitely class divides, and there definitely were things that people were set up for. I saw this video by, I can't think of the channel right now. If I can think of it, I'll mention it. But they were talking about being at a workplace and how people may think just because they're coworkers that they have the same class as each other, but that's not true. The same way you may have thought some of the people you went to school with in college or high school or, middle school or whenever had the same class, that's not true either, because you two could be working at the same place, but that person could come from a family with generational wealth they also could be married to someone who has wealth, or you could be working with someone who's in a lot of debt with a lot of mouths to feed. And so they don't have disposable income, or they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they're literally having to like beg and do three jobs to make ends meet. So it's different realities for different people. And it's crazy because Americans are struggling more and more than ever, but yet there's this like weird pressure to flex and flex and flex and flex. And I feel really sorry for the youth today because they make it seem as if you're not somehow living a lifestyle that's six figures or more, then you're not living. And so everyone's always posturing and making it seem as if they're always on vacation, they're always in new clothes, and people are going into credit card debt, taking out loans, using Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, and doing whatever. Some people are even willing to do compromising things. Like we talked about celebrities back in the day in the casting couch, or about people in the adult film industry and about the quote unquote Illuminati. But how many average people are doing things that are similar to just get the bare minimum to make themselves seem a certain way? And then we have filters and AI and all that. So in many ways, it's like people are being stretched thinner and thinner, but rather than becoming more humble about the fact that the majority of people are struggling, more and more people are deciding they're going to continue to act as if they're doing better than ever. And there's nothing wrong with being positive and having good ideas about it, but it is a toxic culture we live in with this flex culture. And I think it's only going to get worse too, because not only now are people dealing with Nepo babies that are the influencers, but you're probably just dealing with an AI bot that's an influencer at this point. So there's all of this compounding. And then bring in the weather situation, as I mentioned last week, and how we're going to continue to see more extreme weather and more displacement of people, especially those in communities where they're already struggling. And for instance, Hurricane Aaron, the first hurricane is making landfall. There was all this fuss about it being in Category 5, maybe it hitting the East Coast or diverting down to the Southeast. And now I hear it hit North Carolina as a Category 1. Hopefully it doesn't bring a lot of rain or a lot of flooding, but it's probably going to be a rough weather season. And then on top of that, we have a cold front moving in August, not even September yet, a cold front. We're going to get 40 and 50 degrees, which I love fall weather, and I have like a million jackets, so I love wearing jackets, and I'm a fall baby, so I like that cooler weather, but at the same time, it is a little weird to have this cold front this early. I know we had a random cold front a couple weeks ago because of the Canadian wildfires, so our weather has just been bizarre as well. And it's going to continue to be more bizarre because of everything going on. Another thing I meant to mention last week, but I don't believe I did, is when I was talking about Hurricane Katrina and the suffering and land grabs that happen as a result, the reason why they're in such a bad position down south in the Gulf is because of big oil companies. And because of those companies drilling, it's basically destroyed the land over there, so that more and more of the city and the area is sinking every day because they're already at sea level. And this has been the case for a lot of places in the world that have been transformed because of pollution and because of big business. And like they had a tree line at one point that could have been a barrier for hurricanes, but that no longer exists. So that's another thing that a lot of the greed does, is it destroys our land, and then our land kind of fights back against us with weather. But there is definitely a pushing of how far they can go with this administration, and I'll just leave it here. I think about the rumors about Trump running for a third term and how, they could try to change laws for that already. They're militarizing police officers in different states. What wouldn't stop them from trying to change the law? And it is a weird time for sure to be living in. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on these weird weather patterns, as well as the homelessness crisis, as well as the fact that ICE is also joining the police out on the streets in DC, and I hear that they are really harassing people who don't speak English or who look foreign, and everything else going on as far as AI, automation of jobs, layoffs. Have you been impacted by any of these changes or anyone you know? As always, I like to get the discussion going in the chat. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, a great weekend. Take care. God bless. Until next time.